John Lusk here of Lusk Archery Adventures. Series testing, successful hunting. Man, I've got a really good broadhead battle lined up for today. This might be the most intriguing one I've ever done. It's the battle of the iron will solids, okay? And these are both in 100 grain. So in this corner, I've got the new single bevel 100 grain solid, okay, with bleeders, single bevel. And in this corner, I've got the original iron will solid 100 grains that's double bevel. So these heads are just identical in almost every attribute, really every attribute except the beveling. So it's going to be a great test, not only of both of these top tier heads, but it's going to be a great test of the value of a single bevel over the value of a double bevel when everything else is exactly identical. So let's zoom on in here and check out each of these heads, and then we're going to put them to the test using all the test regimen that I'm doing for 2022. And for a description of that, you can read about it in the description right below this video. I'm going to be using my Bowtech CP28 for most of the shots, and then I'll use the Bowtech SR6 for some of them. And I'm using the Bishop Archery FOC King arrows for most of the shots as well. And then I'm using the Bishop Archery Fad Eliminator for the really hard impact stuff. So I'm super eager to check out these heads. Let's zoom on in here and give them both a look and then put them to the test. Here's a good look at the double bevel. And man, I tell you what, when you take an iron wheel out of the package, you don't wonder where your dollar went to, okay? I know they're really expensive, but man, everything about it just screams quality. First, with the materials. The blades are made out of an A2 tool steel, which is really a great steel to use in a broadhead application because it can be made super hard and it's super tough. They use a proprietary hardening process, Iron Will does, to bring them to a Rockwell hardness of 60. And then, with it being A2, they have a resistance to impact about 3 times as great as that of a typical 420 stainless steel. So again, they're super hard and super tough. The ferrules in these are made out of titanium, which has a really good weight to strength ratio. That's to keep them at 100 grains. The blade thickness is 0.062 inches, both in the bleeders and in the main blades. The cutting diameter is 1 1/16 inches this way and 0.75 or 3/4 of an inch this way. There's one set screw that is not load bearing. It just holds everything in place there, but you don't have to worry about that pin breaking or anything because all of the pressure goes back onto the arrow's insert. Now, what's interesting about the 100 grain is they're the same width, same size cut, and the same blade thickness as the 125 grain, and yet they have a shorter overall profile. And that's going to make them a bit more forgiving in flight. There's less surface area, and I would imagine it's going to help them to penetrate a bit more because there's less friction on the blade surface. So I really like that with these 100 grain solids. They look really, really nice. Now, one thing I will note is if you look at the double bevel, and in a minute I'm going to show the single bevel, you can notice that because of the double beveling, the very tip gets really narrow, okay? It's really pointy, which is impressive, but it gets pretty narrow. I'm going to show this again with the single bevel and show you the difference, that the single bevel, it stays thicker longer. It keeps its maximum thickness of the blade longer because it has that single bevel. It's able to do that. Now here's the single bevel. Okay, same materials, same dimensions, but rather than having a double bevel on every side, it has a single bevel, and that's brought to a bevel angle of 32 degrees, which is a really good balance of penetration, sharpness, and still getting a bit of rotation. Now, as mentioned earlier, you can see that the end of it stays thicker longer because it has a bit stouter tanto tip to it, being single bevel in this design. I would imagine that's going to make the tip just a little bit more durable, though I expect both of them to be really durable. So super eager to put these heads to the test and see how they perform. 150, 125. They each penetrated 7.5 inches. I know it may not look like that the way everything lines up, but that is the exact measurement. 225. 200. They each penetrated through 68 layers. The single bevel rotated 15 degrees at 10.5 inches of penetration. Both of the heads are in absolutely perfect shape after going through the MDF 3 times. Here's both of the heads after going through the steel plate 2 times, and they both did very well. The double bevel on the left looks like it lost the very tip of the blade, just very minor there. And the single bevel on the right got a little bit of edge chatter on one of the edges there, as you can see on the top. But otherwise, they both did excellently. And here's the holes from the double bevel in the steel plate. And then here are the holes from the single bevel. And you can see it got a bit more of an S cut due to that single bevel rotation. Here's the double bevel after going through the MDF 3 times, steel plate twice, and then embedding in the concrete. And man, it stuck so deeply in the concrete. You notice that the tip is broken off. That's not from the impact. That's from me trying to get it out with a hammer and a chisel. And as I was chiseling away, there was a point that I went, uh-oh, I think I broke the tip. And sure enough, I did. So the durability on this was just really impressive, and it still spins true. And here's a single bevel after going through the MDF 3 times, the steel plate twice, and then impacting the concrete. Now, it didn't stick in the concrete, but that's not a knock on the Broadhead. There's so many variables that affect that, you know, exactly where it hits and what angle and so forth. It took a huge chunk out of the concrete, and it stayed perfectly intact. I mean, it spins great. Really impressed with the durability here. So what do you think of this Broadhead battle? Hey man, what's not to love about these Broadheads, okay? They both performed extremely well in every area, in their durability, the flight, the sharpness, the penetration. There really isn't a weakness. They got 2 of the highest scores of any Broadheads that I've tested so far in 2022. The only thing that would have made them score a bit better is if they had a wider cut. But you know, that's not necessarily what you want. You know, for some setups, you really want a smaller cut to help you with deeper penetration. And for really bigger animals, like say a moose or something like that, I would want to go with a smaller cut like this compared to some other heads. So they really did well. But there can only be one winner. And it was a really close battle because most of the scoring was exactly the same. But the advantage goes to the single bevel. The single bevel is the winner between these two because while it penetrated the same amount in both of the penetration tests, you're also getting a bit of rotation. Wasn't a lot of rotation, but you're getting some rotation, which means it's cutting more tissue, and that extra thickness at the end, at the very tip of the Broadhead, does make it a little bit more durable in the single bevel. But the score separation was only like 0.6 of a point between the two on a 100-point scale. So really impressed with both of these, but I give the nod to the single bevel. Great job, Iron Will. Man, I love what you're doing. Keep it up, and I look forward to seeing what you come out with next.